the government, you need to massively reduce the regulation.
Sir, the idea of our conversation today is to capture how the internet economy of India is shaping up. And before we move into some conversation about how the industry is shaping, I'd like to just go back and get your thoughts about how it was when you were starting up InfoEdge. And there's one particular question which has always been in my mind. When we look at the InfoEdge empire today, we have these 4 big diversified verticals. But you started with Naukri. What was your thought process when you decided to enter into unrelated and new segments?
So we started with Naukri in 97 and we bootstrapped for 3 years. We raised venture capital in the year 2000 and that's when we began to really invest behind growth. So the company made a small loss for 2 years after raising venture capital, and then we began to make a profit again. And when that happened, the money was piling up in the bank. And then we said, what do we do with this money? And we said, should we give it back to shareholders? Should we expand Naukri outside India? Should we just keep it in the bank? Or should we expand within India, but other verticals? And we decided we would expand into other verticals. So we said, jobs is a classified category in print. We've done that. Other categories are matrimony, the real estate, and education classifieds. And one by one, we got into all of them. And that's how we diversified.
Very interesting. So if I look back at your journey, there have been 3 big highlights. There has been InfoEdge, followed by Zomato and Policy Bazaar.
So the truth is that Zomato and Policy Bazaar, we don't actually get involved in the operations. We are just investors. So we are shareholders, and that's part of our startup investment program. We've invested in about 100 startups till now. Of those, 2 are Zomato and Policy Bazaar. They've done rather well, but there are still a whole bunch of others.
I was going through one of your interviews wherein you said when you meet a founder, you ask them what is the salary you will draw once we invest into you. Why is that question so important?
Important thing is not the answer. The important thing is the thought process that goes into the answer. Now, there are various ways to answer this question, and I've got various answers. So I've got an answer, hey, I've sacrificed the 3 years as an entrepreneur. And so I'm behind my business school batch in salary. I want to catch up. I must catch up. So I want the salary I would have gotten in the corporate sector had I stayed on. That's one answer. Another answer is, you know what? I don't have a very expensive lifestyle. So I need to cover that expense, maybe a little bit more. And then if I take too much of a salary, I'll have to dilute I'll have to raise money to fund that and dilute my equity. So I don't want to fund my lifestyle by dilution. Okay? I had an answer which said, you know what? I'm currently in a job that's paying me X. I want 1.5X because I'll be taking a risk. I've had an answer which said, which we talked about catching up with the business school batch. We have an answer which talked about many answers. And they tell you the way the person thinks. I've had an answer which said, hey, I've come back from the US and I've got to maintain my property there. Plus, you see, I've got 2 kids, and then you go to the American Embassy School. There's so much salary that'll go there. So we'll have 3 cars, one for the kids, one for me, one for my wife, plus there are 2 club memberships. Because I really can't sort of compromise on stuff like that because the family is there. That's another kind of answer. So, you get to know from this answer and the way it's approached what the thinking and mindset is. And that tells you something about, about the founder.
Absolutely. I think this is going to be the most interesting bit of this interview. I can already imagine what budding entrepreneurs would like to take away from this bit. Thank you so much for sharing that, sir. How do you make sense of all that is happening in the India's digital economy? There are so many buzzwords around. How does one make sense?
So I don't make sense of it. I don't even try. Right? I take it sliver by sliver, company by company, and say, can I make sense of this little bit? If I can make sense of this little bit, and it looks good, maybe you should invest behind it. Right? I don't do a lot of macro analysis. I do very micro analysis.
Interesting. Very interesting.
And therefore, I'm not a soothsayer. I don't predict. And I'm saying, फिर ये होगा, फिर 6 साल बाद ये होगा, फिर 10 साल बाद ये होगा. I don't do any of that. I mean, okay, look at it this way. I began to work in 1984, straight out of college in Delhi. And if I look back at what the business environment was then and what it is now, the sea change. New technologies, new companies, new industries, different modes of financing, more capital, more talent, more, very different. If in 1984 you asked me to predict what life will be like in 2024, 40 years later, there is no way I would have predicted this. So if you ask me what it's going to be like 20 years from now, I don't know. Ask me what's going to be like next quarter, let's talk about it.
Is it, just building on this, is it fair and also the right approach to be a little cautious also in the India story?
I think you need to be optimistic. At the same time, you need to be careful. Right? So the optimism is on the general macro. Young population, demographic dividend, aspirational, a huge investment go to infrastructure, digital India, venture capital being available, right? All of that. That's all cause for optimism. Right? What you need to be careful and cautious about is each individual company and decision and time period. And that's where, if you're taking a decision as a business person or an investor, you've got to look at it very, very minutely. And that's where you got to be cautious. So caution in the minute bits, optimism in general. So you can still lose money in an optimistic environment because you took the wrong call in the micro. So you've got to take the right micro calls, knowing fully well the macros should.
Very interesting. I think the VC ecosystem in India is supposed to change a lot based on what we have seen in the last decade or so. It's not the picture that will be in the next 10 years.
Look, that's all a question of availability of funds and sentiment, right? And available opportunities to invest. Now, these are cycles. It's happened before. So I think venture capital really came into India for the first time. I mean, there was venture capital earlier, but very small, around 1998, right? By the middle of 2000, it had vanished because there was a meltdown. Very many companies couldn't raise their second round and they were under stress. Then it came back again around 2006. And so there are ebbs and flows. And those are markets.
Do you think how much we celebrate funding today, does it deserve that, or should that be?
I think a smart entrepreneur will understand that funding is just an intermediate step towards business success. You can get funded and still not succeed. You can succeed without getting funding. Okay? So the key is business success. And that's what should be celebrated.
So when we talk about the overall internet ecosystem, there are of course your Googles of the world which are dominating the space. What do you make of this growing challenge from Indian startups especially against this monopoly?
So I think, look, there are network effects, there are dominant players, there are winner-take-all markets, and there are monopolistic markets, natural monopolies. I think the key is what you don't want is abuse of this power. And that's what I think startups and other companies are worried about. And that's what the government needs to take cognizance of, to make sure while monopolies may be natural, abuse of monopoly power is a real question.
So being a backer of Zomato, how often do you use Swiggy?
Honest answer. I've heard, we respect Swiggy. I've heard good things about it, but I have never used it.
And how often are you relying on quick commerce personally?
Me personally, not a lot, but my kids are. Okay, so it's a younger generation which is doing a lot of the stuff. But there are people I know who use it 5, 6, 8 times a day.
My mom is one of them, yes. But I personally was so surprised to see the phenomena just blow up.
So I recall when this proposal first came to the investment committee on the Zomato board, I chair the committee. And I kept asking, you're paying this money and are you sure demand will be there? And I kept getting an answer. We've done the math. If you get X orders per day per store, or in a store, that store will break even. If you get enough stores to break even, the business will break even. And we think we can do it. And, we kicked our eyes around that. And we said, are you sure? And Deepinder said, trust me. So we trusted him. And it worked.
It's often said in the startup world that resilience is one of the great qualities of a company, of a founder. If you have to define resilience in today's ecosystem, how would you put it in words?
It's the ability to withstand shocks. There was a shock in the year 2000. There was a shock in 2008, 2009, global financial crisis. There was a wobble in 2015. There was a shock at COVID. So if you look at the internet business in India over the last 25 years, there have been 4 or 5 shocks. I think those companies who were resilient were able to withstand those shocks. And resilience means a few things. 1, enough money in the bank. 2, profit streams. 3, sticky customers. 4, the ability to adapt quickly when the environment changes. So these are 4 or 5 things that make up resilience.
Sir, for the kids of today, what do you think they should be studying?
I'm a great believer in the foundational education not changing a lot. Okay? Now, you may study stuff that is current to the context on top of the foundation, and that may change every now and then, but even there it won't change more than 20-25%. At the end of the day, the ability to reason, ability to write, ability to do maths, these are important skills. Physics, chemistry, biology, they're all important stuff. History, geography, literature, those things don't change.
I think that's a very different answer, because usually the common answer today is you need to learn how to build and coding, the two big.
No, that also. But this is still the foundation.
Absolutely. Excellent. So
But who knows? I could be wrong and I could be outdated.
No, I think you need to have that foundation. Big buildings are built on good foundations at the end. So just one final question. If there's one thing from your wish list which India needs to do without fail for its internet economy to grow, whether it's the government, whether it's the businesses, whether it's, analysts and journalists, what is that one thing that the entire ecosystem needs to come together and do?
I think the government need to massively reduce the regulation. Only have that which is essential and nothing else. Because if you do that, the companies and entrepreneurs will grow at a very fast pace and velocity. And I think that is what is needed.
This was a really good conversation. Thank you again for joining us.